Once you have performance targets, it all just becomes this virtuous cycle that helps you remind yourself that this is a new you. These are new habits. You're never going to fall back into the person you were because you will always have those improvements all across the board that you're always going to be able to point to and be like, hey, this is still the new me. Performance nutrition is such a complicated topic that it's actually rather simple. I liken it to somebody who has a high performance car. They put a little block of wood under the bottom of the accelerator and they go, there you go. I'm getting 30 miles per gallon in my Ferrari. And you're saying, yeah, but it's because you can't put down the gas pedal. I'm not going to worry about the last minute little detail of my diet when I know that I'm just going to go have a beer tonight anyway. A mediocre plan followed perfectly well is always going to do better than a perfect plan that's hardly followed at all.
Welcome to Stronger You Radio with Mike Dola. Join Mike and friends as they discuss issues to keep you healthy, fit, and on track to create a stronger you. Let's listen in now.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us again for another episode of the Stronger You Radio podcast. Today, we have a special guest, someone who's helped us tremendously in our growth at Stronger You and our personal knowledge. I want to welcome Alex to the show. Alex Viada, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, Mike, thanks so much. It's just want to say it's really cool to be chatting with you here. Man, we go way back. Yeah, let's see. Duke University graduate, been in kind of the health and more clinical trials business for about a decade. Been a coach exclusively for about 6. Complete Human Performance is the name of my company. It was really founded kind of on the basis of what we call concurrent training, which people just used to call exercise. The whole idea of building kind of all-around athleticism, all-around health, all-around wellness. And yeah, we've been around, like I said, for about 6 years. And our philosophy has always been, very much focus on the fundamentals, focus on the things that matter, and, use the best available science to really keep things simple, really, which, I honestly get the sense is, very much what you guys do successfully as well, is don't compromise on the science, don't compromise on the details, but really just focus on the parts that matter.
Exactly right, man. And I think I signed up with you guys about 4 years ago. Best thing I ever did for myself in terms of both performance and knowledge, really. The amount of stuff I picked up from you guys is crazy. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today is a little bit about digestion and performance nutrition. A lot of our members and our audience is really focused on performing as well as looking good. And we want to talk about the things that they can improve and worry about and do the best.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's always a section I love talking about because I think the more that the basics of digestion and just, even the physiology, anatomy and physiology of the digestive tract and everything, it answers so many questions. I think most importantly, it helps people kind of look at things with their own critical eye and think, does this make sense? Maybe not. So yeah, great topic.
I think it's huge to think logically because with nutrition and fitness, as you know, people use a lot of emotions and they look at things not as, straightforward as they should. And it's like with, just to bring it up early, the keto diet. And a lot of people say, well, I do keto and I'm performing better than ever. And it's like, well, what is keto doing that carbs didn't do? So Can you talk a little bit about that for those wondering? Yeah,
do we kick off with keto? All right.
Let's do it.
Head first. Yeah, why the heck not? The keto diet is one of those things that, man, I remember reading the ketogenic diet, 12 years ago? When Lon McDonald was writing about it, Dan Duquesne was writing about different kinds of keto diets. There was the Atkins diet. The concept has been around for, well over a decade. And in fact, even longer than that, because it's used clinically to help manage certain diseases. The ketogenic diet is really nothing magical whatsoever. It doesn't change anything with the calorie equation. It doesn't let you eat as much as you like. It just basically shifts your body from burning primarily glucose for energy and using glucose as an energy substrate to using a fat-derived compound called ketones. They effectively do the same thing. The only difference is ketones are produced a little bit more slowly than glucose is. Since you're not eating carbohydrates, you don't get some of the ups and downs in energy level that's associated with. So some people, when they are on a ketogenic diet, find that they don't have food cravings, and they find that, I'm not having energy ups and downs and everything else. And for them, that could be a good thing. But it doesn't fundamentally do anything magical. And my issue with the ketogenic diet in particular is that you may not have the troughs in energy, but you also don't have the peaks. If you have any performance-related goals, careful management of a carbohydrate-containing diet gives you more energy. It simply does. The process of going into ketosis, you're effectively capping your energy output. One thing I liken it to is to somebody who has a high-performance car. And you say, well, how do I get better? I want to get better gas mileage out of it. And, I don't want to keep running out of gas and then having to fill up. So what does somebody do? They go into the car and put a little block of wood under the bottom of the accelerator so you can't push it down. And they go, there you go. There's your fuel efficiency right there. And somebody's driving around, they're going, oh my God, this is great. I'm getting, 30 miles per gallon in my Ferrari. And you're saying, yeah, but it's because you can't put down the gas pedal.
Right. So it kind of limits you in a way.
Exactly. Very much so. Very much so. I found the people that tend to have success with it really have success because it just gives them a set of easy guidelines to follow, which can be done other ways. And it helps them eliminate, or it helps some people eliminate cravings. Not everybody. About 5% of people really enjoy eating basically bacon and butter all the time. And they think, oh, this is great. But the rest of us are like, oh, I'd like to actually be able to eat like a normal human. And, like I said, if you have performance goals, having the ability to target your food intake and modulate your carbohydrate levels so that you can get energy when you need it for high-intensity work, for quality workouts, for recovery and everything else is just infinitely better to me than just kind of accepting a 75% level of performance day to day.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And the performance aspect and sustainability, it just seems like it's making dieting harder than it already is. And that's not what we want to do.
That's such a thing because the tough thing about a ketogenic diet is it's so easy to pop yourself out of it. And, as well as I do, and, even I have these moments, we're not always 100% compliant with our diets.
Right.
Things happen. Late nights, whatever the heck else, you have a bad day or anything else, or you even go out with friends. The last thing I think most people need is a diet that literally stops working if you mess up.
Right. It literally is one of those all or nothing diets. And that's for most people that I've met, that's the last thing they need.
Yeah. And, because it's like, look, say you're on a regular, macro controlled diet that's working for you and you have a bad day. You go, 100 calories over, 200 calories, or hey, you've had a really bad day. You kind of lose it and you go completely off the rails. The best thing you can always do in that case is say, you know what? Yeah, it was a bad day, but it didn't kill you. Just get right back on it tomorrow. Shake it off. You'll be fine. Tomorrow's a new day. On a ketogenic diet, if you completely go off the rails, you've actually popped yourself out of ketosis. The next 36 to 48 hours, you're going to have horrible energy fluctuations as your body tries to, get back into it. It's the worst thing you can possibly get. So, just for that reason alone, I'm really hesitant to recommend it to anybody.
Yeah, I joke about it a lot. I don't really care if people want to do it. It's just I don't think it's the best way to get to your performance or body composition goals. So the next thing I want to talk about is description or biochemistry and physiology of digestion. I know a lot of people ask us. They say, "Hey, Mike, I'm going to work out at 6 p.m. What do I eat an hour before?" They think of it like they're a toy car that they pop a battery in the back and it fires them off. Yeah. But it's not that simple, right?
Yeah. This is one of the areas that I think is the most useful to think about, especially when you talk about, well, what supplements should I have after I train or what should I have before I eat first thing in the morning? The thing to remember is that what you eat now has very little impact on what's going to happen to you for the next hour or two. It's what matters most for performance is what you're eating over the course of the entire day. In fact, what you're eating over the course of the entire week. Because when people think about having energy levels for workouts, what you really want to know is how are your glycogen stores? How's that stored sugar that's going to fuel your workouts? How are those levels? And that's a big picture scenario. That's not what you ate 5 minutes before you trained. The first thing that we tell people is, look, on average, you have about what's the exact figure? About 15 grams per kilogram of body weight of glycogen stored in your body. That's a lot of energy to fuel workouts right there. So we tell people, if somebody says, oh, well, should I get a little bit of extra in to give me energy when I train? Unless your glycogen levels are rock bottom, you're probably okay to get in most workouts.
Right. That's almost no one.
Yeah. Exactly. You'd have to be in such a solid deficit for such a long period of time. And you'd have to have such a high training volume to be at chronically low glycogen levels, because that's one of the things your body prioritizes when you take in food, is it tops those up right away.
Right.
So I mean, then the other thing is just talking about the process of digestion itself. First thing is, anything you eat, it's going to take anywhere from 1 hour to 4 hours to just get out of your stomach. And your stomach doesn't really absorb anything other than small amounts of water and salt. That's about it. Anything you take in for the next, like I said, 1 to 4 hours is going to be sitting in your stomach, just processing it and digesting and getting broken down. There's very few enzymes in your stomach, actually. There's almost no absorption. The only things that clear your stomach quickly are basically pure liquids. And even those can take anywhere from 15 to 45 minutes to get through your stomach.
Right.
Cyclists in races will sometimes say, oh, well, I've got 20 minutes left in this race. I'm going to take in another gel to just give me an energy boost. Even that gel, which is a pure, highly digestible sugar paste that's meant to get into your system as quickly as possible, even that can take 20 to 30 minutes to hit your bloodstream. And that is the most digestible thing you could possibly make. What I tell people is it's not what you eat an hour before your workout. It's probably what you have the night before in the case of a morning workout, or it's what you have for lunch in the case of an evening workout that actually matters.
Right. And one of the things I remember you talking about at the seminar in Ireland it was like mashed banana and honey for high performance stuff. And that's like similar to the gels, right?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, because if you want something that's going to be high performance, you got to have something that doesn't require any physical breaking down. To get out of your stomach, a food particle needs to be less than 1 millimeter in diameter on average to get through. Now, if you have digestive issues or you're eating a lot of food, sometimes bigger particles can get through, like corn and things like that. For the most part, it's got to be 1 millimeter or less. And if you think about it, if you're not chewing properly, or even if you're eating larger chunks of granola bars or anything else, your stomach is basically relying on acid and motion to break that down into those tiny chunks.
Something that just prolong it even more.
Exactly. Granola bars are not good sources of quick energy. I mean, anything where you're biting into it and you're like, oh my gosh, that's really chewy, is probably going to do the same thing in your stomach. That's why, if somebody wants something that they can quickly take down before a workout, or if they want something natural that they can use to fuel their workouts, banana and honey as a combination is one of the best ones I've found. It tastes good. It's a good profile of sugars, and the extra potassium certainly doesn't hurt.
That's another important part I think a lot of people forget is proper hydration. It's not just the food. It's you might not perform well because of hydration.
Yeah, that's the biggest one. Yeah, that's the other thing I keep telling people is if you have a morning workout, when people feel terrible in morning workouts, more often than not, it's because they're dehydrated. Because, overnight, your body is basically retaining all that water, but it dumps it as soon as you wake up, and you're probably dehydrated going into your training. So,
right.
Yeah, so the most important thing people can do is track that.
It's interesting because we have so many people that do work out at they'll go to their 5 a.m. CrossFit class, or they'll go for a run at 5 a.m. And they say, well, what do we eat? And I say, don't even worry about it. Just as long as you're eating well the days before and you have some water as soon as you get up, go for your run, because it's also going to give you a smaller eating window. And some of these people are in caloric deficits, and we don't want them to run out of food too early.
Yeah.
So it's not even in terms of digestion, just eating strategy. It helps them a lot.
It really does. And in terms of performance, it's better too, because this all kind of goes together. The most important thing when you actually take in anything for hydration is that the actual concentration of what you take in is as close as possible to basically what we call kind of isoosmotic. And what that means is that there's a very ideal concentration of sugar, electrolytes, and water that digest the best. If you look at drinks like Pedialyte, that's actually the ideal solution. It's used pretty much for rehydration. If you say that the most important thing in the morning is that you hydrate quickly, then the most important thing is the only thing in your stomach is going to be that stuff that gets digested and absorbed the most quickly, and that would be something like Pedialyte. Anytime you add food or anything else, you're changing that concentration. You're adding more sugar. You're adding more salt. You're doing something that's going to make it actually absorb more slowly. So First thing in the morning, you've got all your glycogen levels topped up from dinner the night before. You wake up, the most important thing is to get yourself hydrated. You will do better just drinking a hydration drink or an electrolyte drink than you would having an electrolyte drink and food, because the food's just going to slow it down, and it's probably not going to be doing you any good by the time your workout's done anyway.
Right. And I have a personal story while working with you guys. When I was going for a deadlift PR one time, I ate peanut butter like an hour before. And every time I bent over, I felt like absolute crap. And I blame peanut butter for failing that PR. And so I tell everyone, do not stuff your face with peanut butter before you're going to work out.
You know, and it's funny because it seems like such a hearty, natural thing, peanuts and nuts and peanut butter, but fat slows down digestion, slows down stomach emptying. It sits like a rock. Yeah, it's terrible.
It's awful. I have nightmares about it. I guess the next thing is like the absorption of this stuff into the small intestine. Can you just touch on that really quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So everything takes, like I said, anywhere from an hour to 4 hours to pass into the small intestine. Now, most absorption is actually done in the first part of the small intestine. It's about 2 feet of intestine that comes right after the stomach. That's where bile is released. Your gallbladder produces, the bile salts, the liver. Bile goes in there, and bile, if anybody doesn't know, the bile that your liver produces serves 2 purposes. First of all, it reduces the pH of the stomach acid coming out. And second of all, bile itself is actually an emulsifier. It's like a detergent. It breaks up fat into, if you ever put detergent into like a pot full of oil sitting in the sink.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly what bile does when it touches any fat. Is it breaks it up and breaks it into tiny particles that your system can absorb. That's why if people don't have their gallbladder, they have a really hard time digesting fat.
Oh yeah, we actually notice that a lot. A lot of people will tell us, and we know right away that. I have a personal friend that had theirs removed, and I know it's not pretty when he eats a lot of fatty foods.
Yeah, it's tough. And that's because the body can't actually produce that bile to the extent that's needed to actually break up the fat. So that's one of the first things that happens. Now, a lot of enzymes, a lot of proteins start breaking down there as well. All the proteases and other enzymes that start to break those down start to chip away at those proteins, break them down into 1 to 5 amino acid chains. Food usually sits there for about 3 to 4 hours after it clears the stomach. That's really where most digestion takes place. That's when people talk about digestive enzymes and they talk about absorption. All of that is in that section of small intestine right after the stomach. Right. Interesting thing to note there is when people say, oh, you should take digestive enzymes, usually those digestive enzymes, if they're hitting the stomach first, aren't going to survive to get to the small intestine because the stomach acid breaks up almost everything you take in before it gets to the small intestine.
So it'd be ideal if they could just skip that process, but they can't.
Exactly. Well, that's why when people talk about like certain probiotics and certain digestive enzymes and things like that, most of them don't work for the simple fact that they are broken down themselves in the stomach. There are a few that supposedly survive first pass in the stomach, but it's rare, and you have to take a lot.
Yeah, I could understand that. It's a big market though, the probiotics. So.
Huge, man. It's huge.
Yeah. It's interesting because this is going to teach a lot of people that they don't have to pack it in right before their workouts and things because it's all just like everything's getting in line. And the more you stuff in, the longer it's going to take to pass through.
Yep. I mean, even just tracking that process, think about it. Think about, okay, so I'm not going to work out till 7 o'clock at night when I get home. It's noon. I'm going to have a sandwich now. Like, should I have something else before I work out? And you say, well, think about it. Say you have a sandwich that just has, a small amount of fat in it, some protein, you got your carbohydrates. That's going to take, let's say, 2 to 3 hours to pass through the stomach. By the time it's passed through the stomach, it's already 3 o'clock.
Right.
Now it's going to take another 3 to 4 hours to actually have all of that stuff further break down and get absorbed in the bloodstream. It's already 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock by the time that's actually hitting your bloodstream. That's actually pretty much perfect if you're going to go then train or work out.
Right. It gives you the ideal amount of time for everything to be absorbed and utilized.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I tell people just stick to your normal diet. If your calories are fine, don't worry about popping something. The only time you really, really, really need to worry about that is if you're doing a 3 to 5 hour training session and you're going to actually bottom out your glycogen levels and you definitely need something during. That's really bad.
On that note, can we talk a little bit about, performance nutrition for a CrossFitter? I guess from recreational level to high level. We've had many, many clients. A lot of them are CrossFitters, and we've had, I believe, 6 or so in the games last year, and they all kind of eat very similarly, and they don't have to worry about all that much. Can you talk a little bit about what the best performance strategy would be for them?
Well, it's interesting because, when you think about paleo and how it started in CrossFit, as CrossFit has changed, that's become less popular. Part of the reason is because CrossFit is actually now requiring much more kind of conditioning and endurance than it used to a great extent. So paleo, not allowing for enough carbohydrates in general, unless you make a huge concerted effort, hasn't really worked so well lately. Right. So most CrossFit diets at this point, most of our CrossFit athletes, it's remarkable how boring and unexceptional their diets are, just in terms of it's normal people food and just a lot of it. And honestly, spaced pretty evenly throughout the day. And part of that is because, it's that same thing. Don't slam anything right before a workout, especially not where you're doing, burpees or handstand walks. You don't want anything heavy in your stomach. There's an aerobic component to the workout. There's a heavy anaerobic component. It's so varied that trying to adopt some, crazy, almost too clever nutrition strategy is just, it's doing yourself a disservice, I think.
You talk a lot about like normalcy with nutrition, not throwing anything surprising into your system.
Exactly. And that's the thing precisely. Like it's interesting that something like CrossFit, which is specifically designed to have as many different parameters and modalities and time domains, and it's designed to test so much and tax so much that it makes sense that you can't really try to second guess it with anything beyond, let's just eat in a way that makes me generally feel good. Let's eat in a way that I know sits well with my stomach. I'm not going to take any crazy supplements or anything else that could jack my heart rate up or down. I'm not going to pound sugar right before a workout because I could get, that blood sugar spike and feel terrible halfway through. I'm just going to eat like a normal human being. And if that makes me feel good day to day, it's going to make me feel good in this workout that could, quite frankly, be anything. I just don't know.
Right. And I don't want to offend anyone that works really hard at CrossFit, but the demands in terms of glycogen usage aren't all that much in your average hour-long CrossFit class.
Absolutely not. You can burn calories doing CrossFit, absolutely, but that's not really the objective, and that's never your energy stores are never really the limiting factor. I mean, people will fail, people will burn out, people will die at, round 5 of the WOD, but for the most part, it's not a training system that tanks out your energy stores and, is burning 1,500 calories an hour or anything crazy like that.
Right. And there was a post in the group the other day about someone worked out at CrossFit and it kicked their ass, and what can they do to perform better next time? And it was like, I said, sometimes those workouts will just be designed to kick your ass and there's nothing you can do. And it's not a bad thing. Yeah.
And like you're saying, with that individual in particular, like it's just meant to be a crusher workout and you're just going to gas out. And sometimes that's what's going to happen no matter what nutritional interventions. And I think a lot of times people are tempted to try to find, like with weight loss, they're tempted to try to find some sort of secret weapon or something that's, going to give them that energy kick that they really need. And, sometimes there's just no two ways around it. You're going to feel gassed. And I would tell them, just like with workouts in the morning, focus on that hydration. Even in distance runners, who are definitely blowing through energy stores, 9 times out of 10, I will see poorly managed hydration diminish their performance before poorly managed food.
Right. Is there anything in particular that they should look out for? Because that was going to be my next segue, is the endurance athletes.
Endurance athletes, what should they look out for? They, just like CrossFitters, I would say don't do ketogenic diets. For endurance athletes, I think the most important thing is to focus on, digestibility of food, certainly, especially around training. GI upset for runners is always huge. Don't do anything different the day before a big training run or the day before a race, which I think is something so critical. Don't waste your time carb loading. And, honestly, the same thing, like most times, 9 times out of 10, a runner may need extra carbohydrates, but chances are their glycogen stores are topped up anyway, just, by virtue of the fact that they're, hopefully not in a absurd deficit. They're usually doing pretty okay. So, for endurance athletes, the most important thing is just, again, stay hydrated, don't eat anything crazy on race day, and don't binge the day before a big race because you think it's going to help you.
And that's an important point. I think people are kind of trained to hear, like, have a big pasta night, really crush the food for dinner the night before. Can you talk about why that's not a great idea?
Yeah, there's a couple of ideas. First of all, like I said, the fact that your glycogen levels are topped up anyway means that there's really no point. In fact, the old carbohydrate loading protocols that used to, be several days of low carb and then a depletion workout and then pounding carbohydrates, the increase in stores people were talking about was anywhere from 5 to 10% in elite athletes. It's a horrible protocol anyway.
Yeah, it's not worth it for maybe 5% and having maybe, feeling all bogged down full of food while you're going to run.
Yeah, and what's interesting is when they then tested that protocol against a similar training and diet program where simply for 3 days before the race, they replaced about 10% of their total calories with additional carbohydrates. In other words, took 10% of their fat and protein away and replaced it with carbohydrates for 3 days. They had the exact same effect with none of the other nonsense. That's marginal. The other thing is you have a big meal the day before a race. How do most of us feel when you eat a really big dinner? How do you feel the next morning? You feel sluggish. You may have heartburn. You didn't sleep well. And on top of that, we talked a little bit about the digestive system and transit time. I know I've talked about the whole ileal brake mechanism a little bit. I can go over that if you're interested.
Yeah, sure.
So the digestive system doesn't like leaving food undigested. If you eat a lot of food, the body still wants to keep it moving, but it's going to make sure everything gets processed. If you eat a really, really big meal, it's got to go somewhere. And once the stomach starts emptying, it's going to start filling your intestine and everything else. If you eat a big meal and just kind of eat a little bit after that, your small intestine's eventually going to fill up. If the end of your small intestine, right before it gets to the large intestine, that's called the ileum, if the ileum is filled and there's a lot of food still in there digesting, your digestive system actually slows down and your stomach stops emptying. It's a little like, putting a gate at the start of a tunnel. If there's still piled up trying to get out of the tunnel, you're not going to, keep opening up and letting more cars in.
Exactly right.
So what happens is, if you eat a massive meal the night before, it's going to take about 12 to 14 hours later, it's still going to be at the end of the small intestine. So you have that entire tunnel that you've just filled up the night before. First thing in the morning, what's the most important thing we said before any sort of event or any sort of race is get that hydration set and start taking in, calories to last you the rest of the day, even if it's just a small amount. If that tunnel is full and, your stomach isn't actually emptying, anything you take in the morning is just going to sit in your stomach and not digest. So what's going to happen if you carb load and eat a whole bunch the night before? Your stomach's going to be full. Your intestines are going to be not very comfortable. You're not absorbing any fluids whatsoever. You're going to feel sick. You're going to have very little energy. And in every other regard, you're going to have set up the absolute worst situation to have any kind of good performance.
Now, the type of athlete you guys specialize in, the hybrid athlete, being pretty good at everything, it goes kind of against what a lot of people think. They think, if I want to be really strong, I have to sacrifice my running. If I want to run really well, I can't lift. Is there anything specific with their nutrition that will help their performance?
That's a tough one because one of the nicest things about that system of training, of course, is since you're doing more kinds of work, it lets you eat more. But that obviously has its limits. I think the most important thing with this type of training is realizing that if you're losing weight versus gaining weight, you drastically change the improvements you can count on. If strength is your focus, that's harder to do in a concurrent program when you're losing weight, but you will find that your endurance work just skyrockets. And the reverse, once you turn around and hit maintenance or you can go into a margin of surplus, your strength work will start to explode and, your endurance work may improve much less quickly. What I love about those kind of programs and doing everything is no matter what phase of diet or what phase of body composition change you're in, you will see improvements. If you want an absolutely ideal situation, of course, and have it be absolutely perfect, you can periodize your nutrition based on the training day. In other words, taking a little more carbohydrates on the weekend if you're doing your long conditioning sessions or your long endurance sessions. And during the week, if you're just lifting, you can run a bit more of a deficit because lifting is not quite as impacted by low calories or even, slightly lower glycogen levels than a run would be, for example.
Right.
But, for the most part, no major nutritional considerations. I think the most important thing is just realize that that kind of training is going to let you find something to progress in no matter what stage you're at.
I love that you said that, because I think with nutrition, a lot of our members are so caught up on the way they look only, or the scale. And I always tell people, if you're getting a little demotivated, go for performance. Yeah. Try to perform better, and you're going to be so motivated.
It's phenomenal. I went through a phase. What got me back into health and training and nutrition and everything else is I went through a phase in college where I became completely sedentary. I gained 70 pounds after high school. I started dieting just to look better, but then I realized I actually want to feel good. And no matter what happens with your body composition, knowing that you can just get out and run, or lift more than you ever could, all those things, they're so satisfying. And it is always such a steady improvement. The scale can go up and down. You can have a bad week. You may feel bloated one week and say, oh my gosh, I look terrible. I think I'm going to be back to square one. But those performance improvements will always show you that you're still making a difference. And
it's awesome. We have so many of our members with you guys, and it's so cool to hear about all that stuff.
It's my favorite because I think the two feed off each other. You start looking better, you start feeling better. And once you have performance targets as well, it all just becomes this virtuous cycle that all helps you remind yourself that this is a new you. These are new habits. This is a new lifestyle. This is kind of a bright new outlook you have. And it all just kind of goes together. You're never going to fall back into the person you were, because you will always have those improvements all across the board that you're always going to be able to point to and be like, hey, this is still the new me. Even if I have a bad day, even if I have a bad week, this is still the new me.
Right. And unless you completely give up, you can always be that new person.
Yeah.
And there's so many things to look forward to. Man, it's awesome. Is there anything you want to touch on? Is there any nutrition stuff you think our people can benefit from?
My biggest thing when I like talking about performance nutrition is precisely talking about, like you mentioned, normalcy. I think performance nutrition is such a complicated topic that it's actually rather simple. The physiology of the body it's complicated, but most importantly, it tries to maintain a balance. There's so much about what's the optimum protein intake for athletes, and what's the optimum this and optimum that. And so much of that nutrition science is focused around trying to make that 1% to 2% of fine-tuning difference that for the vast majority of people doesn't make a difference whatsoever, because we're not 100% compliant anyway.
It's so funny that you say that, because what I see out there, when I say out there, not with our people, is everyone's trying to figure out the absolute best thing in the world. But even being close to that is so difficult to do that it almost makes it a waste of time and mental energy.
And I hate the term majoring in the minors, but that's really what it is. It's look, if you're engaging in a number of nutritional hacks to try to get yourself 1% to 2% more performance, but you're only 80% compliant on your diet anyway, then what are you doing? It's like It's like not studying for a test and then thinking, oh, well, I'm going to get an extra % of extra credit,
It's funny, really. And it's our job to make people realize that. And I know Josh is big on it. Josh is listen, guys, do not worry about all that crazy stuff that you think you need to worry about. If you do this over and over and over, you will see the most amazing success in dieting that you have ever seen in your life.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people think we're vague. They're they'll message me and they'll be like, hey, Mike, I asked my coach a question, but his answer was a little vague. And I'm like, well, what was the question? And they'll tell me in the answer, and I'll say, well, that's because he only told you what you need to worry about. He's not going to go through all this other stuff that's just going to overcomplicate your life.
Yeah. Some of the greatest athletes I know, the highest performers, we're talking world-class ultra runners, strength athletes, strongman competitors, all these people, they're very much about just keeping that 80 to 90% compliance. And, if a sponsor hands them a supplement or something else that they think they can use, they'll take it, but they don't rely on it, because that's that extra 10%. And most of us, me personally, I'm not going to worry about the last minute little detail of my diet when I know that I'm just going to go have a beer tonight anyway. And I'm thinking, okay, if I really want extra 5% performance, I'll go replace that beer with just some plain water and, potentially some real food. I think when you're vague with people and you're saying, look, these are the 3 things to focus on, or the 2 things, or the 1 thing, that is the biggest service that you can do, even for most elite athletes. Keep it simple.
we're all kind of just simple. I mean, there are people that are amazing athletes, but they don't have to be that different than the normal person. I think the consistency thing, and this could be its own podcast in itself, but the magic about consistency is going to supersede almost any little nutritional rule there is outside of energy balance.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's just it. Like, a mediocre plan followed perfectly well is always going to do better than a perfect plan that's hardly followed at all.
Right. And that's where we, the whole weekend dieter thing, and we say, it doesn't matter if you're good for 4.5 days a week if you blow it on the weekends. It's all going to kind of average out.
Yeah, exactly. So, worry a little bit less about it so you don't beat yourself up about it, and just tighten things up on the weekend and you will do better.
Right. So without getting too much off topic, back to the performance stuff, you're saying carbs are amazing and everyone should eat them. Is that right?
Absolutely. And if you give people less than 50 grams, you're just an evil person. No, carbs are amazing, and you can't be afraid of them. They're needed for body functions, and there was this whole craze that people will still vilify them and say, oh well, carbs will kill you, and sugar's bad, and sugar's the devil, and this and the other. Yeah. It's all in how they're applied. It's all in how they're utilized, how much you have, what you're doing with them. That's it. You have a good level of activity and your body needs carbohydrates to run. It's funny because people say, oh, well, your body needs protein to build and repair and needs fat for hormone production, and you don't really need carbs for anything. And that's kind of like saying, a car needs an engine, but it doesn't really need gasoline for anything. It's like, well, wait a minute.
It'll sit there and look nice, but...
And the moment you try to go anywhere, it's going to go, and just nothing.
Yeah, it's just going to sit. It's just going to be like a paperweight.
Talk to any bodybuilder right before competition day, and they'll tell you the same thing.
That's a whole other animal right there.
Yeah, no kidding. But
yeah, it's the carbs get a bad rep because they're easy to overeat. But a lot of people that name carbs are naming like cookies and cupcakes and pizza, which are probably more calories than fat. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, people say, "Well, I'm a carb addict," and it's going, "No, you're just a hyperpalatable food addict."
You're not crushing fruit.
Exactly. It's like, when's the last time you sat down and just started eating tablespoons full of table sugar? No, you like things that are probably as much, if not more fat than carbs. You just like junk food. That's what it is.
Yeah, and it doesn't make you a bad person. You just need a little more self-awareness, that's all.
Oh, heck, I've got a heck of a sweet tooth, man. I mean, you leave a chocolate cake or something in the fridge, I'm going to have a hard time resisting it. But, I just, all I need to think about is how terrible I'll feel if I house the whole thing. And it's all part of that awareness that you build.
Now, you said something interesting there about the difficulty to say no to things. Can you talk chemically kind of what's happening there? Because I know it's debatable whether it's a true addiction or not, but there are a lot of things going on in the brain that are making people think, I need that cake.
When people talk about, kind of the whole reward feedback mechanism in the brain, it's very similar. We've seen that bad graphic going around where people say, oh, well, when you eat sugar, it lights up the same areas as cocaine. Well, yes and no. I mean, we are hardwired as organisms to actively seek out things that are either good for our survival or good for reproduction. And quick sources of energy are good for our survival. So it makes sense that your brain would actually want to chemically reward you for taking in things that are very calorie dense. Certain personality types have a harder time managing that than others. I mean, you look at, for example, gambling addiction. People get very addicted to that kind of rush, that rush of uncertainty and, the massive reward hit that they get. And, based on your personality type and based on your own predisposition and how you neurologically manage those hormones and neurotransmitters, you may find yourself having a very, very difficult time controlling that reward system. So it can be an addiction. But, the good thing is, like any other addiction, it's something you can overcome. It's something you can actively manage. You need to look out for when you're kind of craving that reward system, and you can actually replace it with other rewards. I mean, and that's what we tell people is, if you're really feeling down in the dumps and you're craving that dopamine hit, or you need that, and you typically get it from food. You had a bad day, you're depressed, whatever else. That's why it's so critical for people that, some people replace it with athletics. Some people enjoy the dopamine hit that they get from hitting a PR. I think it's finding that replacement, finding something else that gives you that same feedback is so critical for managing addiction. And that's why so many, addiction programs always focus on community, and they focus on, family and other habits and things like that. Because yes, it is similar to an addiction, but like an addiction, you can manage it by just finding something else that makes you happy.
Yeah, I think if people know they can stop, it's huge for them. It's just that they have never stopped, so they don't know. They don't really believe in themselves, as super motivating as that sounds. Like, you have to believe in yourself and know that you don't have to do that.
One of the funniest things I was ever told, actually in one of my graduate nutrition courses, we were actually talking about the kind of the food addiction thing and what that feels like, and basically saying, what's really interesting is next time you are really craving something sweet, go hug your dog.
That's the cutest thing I've ever heard.
The funny thing is, it actually works. If you are actually in some ways craving just like a dopamine hit, it's amazing what something like hugging your dog can do to temporarily help you forget about it. And this guy is one of the most curmudgeonly researchers I've ever spoken to. He wasn't doing this because he necessarily loved dogs. He was doing this because he says that's how the brain is wired.
Right. It's interesting. If I do that with my cat, I'm going to lose an eyeball. So I'm going to just stay strong.
Pet your cat or make your cat do something cute. I don't know. It was really interesting because I've actually tested it since then, mostly because my dog is really cute.
And your dog is awesome.
He desperately wants to be a part of this conversation now. But it's amazing how it works. It really is. Find something else that gives you that kind of little rush and that little hit, and it's amazing. Now, that doesn't mean go out and take up gambling to help you fight your food addiction, but
Right. Make it a good, clean fun, like hugging your dog or your child or
absolutely
lifting some weights. So, Alex, we're going to wrap up now. Can you just give us a few quick takeaways?
Yeah, honestly, I would say first of all, normalcy is the biggest thing for sports performance. More than anything else, what you guys do and actually focusing on your diet and, being as consistent as possible is really the ticket to your best performance. The other big takeaway I would say is that for anybody with athletic aspirations, focus more on your hydration and electrolyte balance than you do necessarily on trying to find a supplement or a snack that's going to give you energy. That is the biggest thing I come to over and over again. The biggest thing I focus on with our athletes and everything else is dialing in proper hydration, and is going to do more for your performance than I think than trying to get fancy or add anything to the rest of the food you eat. Just make sure that's as consistent and honestly high quality as you possibly can. I would say the other big thing is, if you're peaking for an event or prepping for an event or having a big event coming up, don't do anything new or different on event week. Keep that as reasonable as you can and as consistent as you can, because what you do in training is what you should do in competition every time.
Awesome. I love it, man. Every time we talk, I learn a little bit more from you, and I know our people are going to learn even more. Can you tell them if they want to follow you or how to get in contact with CHP for training? We'd love to give that to them.
Our website is CompleteHumanPerformance.com. There's actually even a live chat option on the website if you want to reach out. Usually I'm the one managing that. Feel free to shoot us an email. There's a contact us form there. You can follow us on Instagram. And we actually also did just release some training templates, which are basically a strength and running template that is actually accessible to pretty much all skill levels. If you're just starting out, you've never run before, just start with walking. And it's a great way to kind of get started on, kind of an integrated training program. Because like I said, for me, finding something else that you can, take satisfaction in makes it so much easier to ride out the peaks and troughs of your nutrition plan. So that's all I got.
Love it. Thanks again, Alex. Thank you, audience. Stronger You family. We love you guys. We will see you next episode.
Stronger You Radio is a broadcast wellness production powered by StrongerUFit.com. Content copyright Stronger You. Executive producer Frank Sardella. Thanks for listening to Stronger You Radio. For more information on the podcast, visit StrongerUPodcast.com.